Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I am just going to, oh, there we go. I'm very excited to be here. I've been able to present a patent in the past, and it's always an honor. Thank you for coming to this talk on orthographic mapping and phase theory. I'm a professor of early literacy development at Brooklyn College, which is part of the City University of New York system, otherwise known as CUNY. I care deeply about the translation of research to practice, and therefore you'll see in my little cover here that I'm the founder of the CUNY Reading Corps, which trains hundreds of pre-service teachers in evidence-based interventions and pairs them with thousands of public school students in need of support. And in order to get more of this type of tutoring out there around New York and elsewhere at other universities, I recently founded the Reading Institute, which is a nonprofit to support more tutoring efforts. Okay, so a little about me before you sit with me for an hour and think, who is this lady? I'm a teacher, and while I was teaching, I became fascinated with the skill of reading and how we acquire this ability. As an interventionist, as a reading interventionist, I worked with striving readers in grades 3 to 5. I became very interested in Dr. Linnea Aries' research while working on my master's in ed psychology, and I sought her out as my PhD mentor. I was honored to receive a fellowship to work with her for 5 years for my PhD. And then after that, I always snap pictures with Linnea when I'm with her. I just adore her. She is the North Star of all of my research and all of my intervention work. After my PhD with her, I wound up at Brooklyn College. But most importantly, I'm a mom of 2 young kids. One is in the partial alphabetic phase and one is in the full alphabetic phase. And this talk today is really just me attempting to be a surrogate for Dr. Aries' thinking. I think she's trained me very well, and I'm very honored to work with teachers to try and translate her theories. So here's Dr. Aries. She's known as one of the most prolific researchers. She has over 200 articles. Her studies are some of the most rigorous in the field due to her extremely strong methodological design. She's an experimental psychologist. She trained me as an educational psychologist. Her studies have been replicated and extended to support theories. Again, these studies are not for the faint of heart, quite rigorous statistically and methodologically. She holds 2 of the most well-regarded theories in the field of reading science that we're going to talk about today, orthographic mapping and phase theory. And Dr. Aries has given me permission to use many of the slides that I've included in this talk, because I like to stay as true to her explanation of the theories as possible. And so here I just have, she's the distinguished professor. Her research focuses on the psychological processes of learning how to read, and there are her 2 theories. Okay, so what we'll cover today, we're going to go over orthographic mapping. I'm going to try to do a fun activity. We'll go do implications for practice. We'll get into phase theory, fun activity, implications for practice. So at 2 time points, I'm going to ask you to pull out a piece of paper and pencil, and you might as well do it just to stay engaged. It's a long hour without some engagement. And here we are at our first activity. So I'm not going to explain this one to you right now, but I just want you to imagine that someone is flashing cards at you, okay? I will explain this whole thing later. The first card, and I'm sorry I showed it, but here we go. You're gonna try to learn these, but don't write them down, okay? We don't let kids write down the flashcards when we flash them at them. Try to remember this word. Anthracene. Anthracene is a hoop with spikes. Wuxing. Wuxing is text that is incomprehensible. Feigner. Feigner is a stroll in a swamp. Gilloid. Gilloid is a high-pitched noise followed by a drum beat. Sayosi. Sayosi is paper that smells like butter. We'll come back to this. And you may have figured out that my children helped me with those definitions of these delightful non-words. But you can think of yourself as an emerging reader who's trying to learn some new words that you may or may not know the definitions of, right? So we'll come back to this and we're going to see how well you learned those words. Okay, so part one, we're going to get into the theory of orthographic mapping. And again, it's Dr. Linnea Airey's theory. So orthographic mapping, what is it? Well, we have our word orthography. Ortho, the first part of the word, means right or correct, as in orthodontics, orthopedics, orthodox, right? That ortho is there, meaning this is the correct way, this is the right way, this is how we straighten things out to be correct. Graphy means to draw or write. So think biography, epigraph, all right? So orthography is the conventional spelling system of a language. Airey explains that words can be read in 4 ways. So we know what orthography means, but now let's translate that. Okay, so we've got orthography. Let's get to this concept of the theory of we're mapping words in memory. Let's see how we get there. So the 4 ways we can read words are: first, words can be read by prediction, which you have to rely on context clues and partial alphabetic knowledge. We know that this is not a sustainable way to read. But as a scientist would, like Dr. Airey is, she's like, yes, it is a way you can do it though. So let's acknowledge it, but let's say, like, let's be clear. It happens, it's not reliable. Words can be read by analogy, when part of the word is recognized and used to read another word with the same word part. So if you can read jump, you can read dump. While helpful at times, and we often do a lot of this like word family work with young students, it has its limits, right? There's only so many word families, but we can use this. It's another way to read words. Okay, number 3, words can be read by decoding. Okay, the grapheme phoneme units, when you decode, are broken apart, briefly held in memory, and then blended together to read the words. So Airey explains that as we progress through reading phases, we begin by blending together individual letters, then letter units, the graphemes, then even word units like the prefixes or suffixes, in order to efficiently decode. And I'm using IPA over here, so it's not your traditional like school type of phonetics. And finally, words can be read from memory by sight, okay? This means that when we see a word, we automatically retrieve it from long-term memory. So how do we read words? Airey explains that an important way to organize these approaches, those 4 that I just put there, which I actually listed them from the most unreliable to the most reliable, it's best to organize these and consider if the word that's in front of you is a known or unknown word. So unfamiliar words that you've never read before can be read the following ways. And here I'm going to reverse the order of reliability to emphasize that decoding is your best bet for getting words into long-term memory. Okay, so when it's unfamiliar word, best bet is decoding. If you need to, you can use analogy. Oh boy, maybe you have to fall back on prediction. All right. Now, familiar words are words that have been previously read and stored in memory. These words are automatically read by sight and can be retrieved immediately. Okay. So remember, Dr. Airey has written a lot about this. All words, when practiced, become read from memory by sight. But that doesn't just happen like this. And that's a big part of this talk on orthographic mapping. So that's great that we have the capacity to do this sophisticated thing called orthographic mapping, right? And again, I'll get to this in just a second. But before we start just jumping to let's map these words, what skills need to be in place? Young students need to be able to do several things. So Airey breaks this down for us based on research findings. So students need to have phoneme segmentation skills. They need to analyze words' pronunciations into the smallest sounds or phonemes. The next skill is that they need knowledge of grapheme phoneme correspondences. So this is sometimes written as GP, grapheme phonemes, or GPCs, grapheme phoneme correspondences. So students need to know letter sound units of the writing system. This becomes the glue, but this will only get us so far, right? Let's think about it. The word rain, I often use this as an example. If a young student, an emergent reader, was trying to spell that word, they may spell it R-A-N-E, R-A-Y-N, R-E-I-N after they've learned each of these spelling patterns. They might try it out, right? So you need grapheme phoneme correspondences, and the more sophisticated of this knowledge that you have, the better off you will be. But it's not going to actually help you word by word. You have to go through some type of mapping process where you connect the graphemes or letters to the phonemes or sounds within that particular word. So within the word, this is how we know that rain is R-A-I-N and not R-A-N-E, like I just gave those other examples. Both are possible based on grapheme phoneme correspondence knowledge, right? You learned AY says the long A sound, why not use it? My older child is in this area right now. She's like, well, I just learned this awesome spelling pattern. Why can't I use it here? It's like, no, we have proper spellings. We have orthography. We have a correct way that we spell these words. Finally, students need to have knowledge of word meanings. So you need to be able to bond spelling sound connections to meaning and memory. This is how you know that the word rain is R-A-I-N and not the other rain, like a king's reign or a queen's reign, which is R-E-G-N, right? So that definitely is going to come into play. And it is critical for comprehension and for your spelling when you're writing. All right, so here is Aries' depiction of her theory of orthographic mapping. She explains that it is a cognitive process in which the reader, now remember, cognitive process, this is happening in the brain, in which the reader connects the graphemes in a word to their phonemes and attaches meaning to create an amalgam or a representation of the word. Over time, this amalgam is clarified, strengthened, and stored in long-term memory for automatic retrieval when you see the word. So you see it, and over time, maybe you had to decode it and whatnot, but over time, now it's just going to come out when you see it. Note, even when you automatically say the word when you see it, this mapping, at some point when you broke it down, this is happening behind the scenes. Okay. So out there in the field, there are lots of representations of orthographic mapping. They are beautiful. I'm just throwing a few of these out there. They're absolutely beautiful. I just want to make sure that the field understands these are fantastic, typically practitioner representations of orthographic mapping, but they are not Aries' theory of orthographic mapping, okay? It's someone else's depiction of it, which is totally cool and wonderful. I always prefer this depiction because I like the simplicity of it. Okay, when does orthographic mapping happen? Well, this is one of my favorite things that Ari clarified recently in 2022, even though this has been in her writings all along. So she says, look, let's be clear. Orthographic mapping occurs when students decode words, right? So it's activated when you decode words. It's activated when you study grapheme phoneme relations in the spellings of words. It is also activated even when you are simply looking at the spelling of a word and you hear the way that it's pronounced. This is typically the case when you already have some level of grapheme phoneme correspondence knowledge, so that as you're hearing the word and you're seeing the word, you may be doing some type of cognitive mapping just by looking at that. Ari has a famous study on this from 2008. So this is not for, this isn't going to happen for your most emergent readers. But orthographic mapping, when you get a little older, it does happen in this way. This cognitive process kicks in. Okay, so let's just test our orthographic mapping, right? So here's the Stroop task and its orthographic mapping in action. So Ari often uses this as a way to demonstrate the automatic retrieval of words. Right now, I would like you to try naming the color, but ignore the word. Try it. Color, not word. It's a much slower process. I'm sure you could all do it, or for some of you, maybe it just gives you a headache, right? And you're just like, I don't want to do this right now. It's 8:30 in the morning. No matter what, it's a slower process. And this has been demonstrated in research quite a bit. And that's because you are resisting the automatic retrieval of the word in memory. So now with me, just forget the color, just read the words, right? You could go like this: red, green, blue, black. Super fast. Try it again. Yeah, that's the easier way to do it because you have those, you're a proficient reader, you have those words stored. Okay, so when we try and resist the orthographic mapping, it actually helps substantiate the theory. So ARI has examples of grapheme phoneme mappings that you will often use. So here's an example of the word listen, where we're mapping it again to IPA, and you see the graphemes, the connections, she always calls those the glue, to the phonemes. Note the silent letters, right? It's not listen, it's listen. We pronounce it listen, right? You've got island, same thing here with the silent letter. It's like, oh, as an emergent reader, as a speller, what are you supposed to do with that silent letter? Well, at some point, you have to learn that yes, it's spelled that way, but we pronounce it this way. Or it's pronounced that way, but we spell it this way. Here's check a more simple example with our digraphs in there, and the word giggle with our double consonants and that l ending. Okay, no matter what, I'm going to come back to this symbol again. The best way is we need to analyze these letter sound relationships or these grapheme phoneme correspondences. So other theories complement Airy's theories of orthographic mapping, and I always like to acknowledge them. I like when our field is very inclusive. It's not at, like fighting on each other. It's like, oh yeah, well, Airy talks about it this way, Perfetti and Hart talk about it this other way, right? So the lexical quality hypothesis is one of these theories that complements, and I actually think when we have more theories that are converging, I don't think this, it is true that it strengthens, they strengthen each other. All of these theories are based on rigorous research. So this is just a scan from a book. This is like a very professor thing of me to do. Like I couldn't recreate this. I just scanned it here. So here's Perfetti and Hart's lexical quality hypothesis. It explains that a high quality representation of a word is critical for reading comprehension. So in this upper left corner, you have OR for the orthography of the word gate, Gate, right? Then you have the phonology, the PH, that's how we pronounce it, of the word gate. Then we have the semantic or syntactic relationship of the word. And this took me a long time a while ago to figure out. WIIGM stands for what it is gate means. This is very researchy, right? Like no one's gonna, I had to dig through the article to figure this out. So a word has a high quality. Remember, this is the lexical quality hypothesis. If its phonological, orthographic, and semantic syntactic information are well integrated. We strengthen these high quality representations through various exposures, multiple encounters with the word. We don't start out of nowhere with a high quality representation. We build it over time. And each word may have more salient features than the other. So words with difficult spellings, that impacts the orthographic representation, that bubble. Words with multiple meanings impacts the SE, right? Or the semantic use of the word, right? It needs to be further clarified. So homophones may impact the orthographic representation and the semantic representation. Those are really tricky for all of us at times, right? If any of these characteristics of the word are not well represented or integrated, the word will be more difficult to retrieve, and therefore mental energy will be sacrificed, impacting comprehension. So I have up here the homophone gate, right? Gate, Gate, and gate, like the gait of a horse, Gait, may create confusions and then it may become a temporary threat to the quality of the representation. So here we've got these three right there, right? So at any point in time, those may be weakened when you're trying to make this connection between gates. You see the GATE at the top, and then gate GAIT. Both of those need to have be clear in memory before you can figure out which one you're going to use at what point in time. Okay, I think it's a beautiful representation of just the process of learning overall. So now we're going to talk a little bit about Dr. David Scher's theory of the self-teaching hypothesis. So once letters, sound, or grapheme phoneme knowledge is in place, along with the ability to segment and blend phonemes, students begin to apply this knowledge to read new novel words. Well, you need to be able to attend to the order of the letter sounds in the word, right? So segmenting those words is critical, right? We've got all these, you've got really have to attend in these emergent moments of, or a new encounter with a word. So we use phonological decoding, so we segment then blend to read the new words independently and to build up our mappings of words in memory so that they're available for automatic retrieval later on. This is how we can read non-words or any new word without being overly reliant on a more proficient reader for support. This is what I love about Dr. Scher's work, is he's trying to say, like, look, orthographic mapping, absolutely, it's critical. You don't always have a proficient reader saying, well, we pronounce this word gate, right? At some point, students have to have enough knowledge where it starts kicking in and they start doing this on their own. Okay, this is how we're able to read non-words or any new words when we're young, even when we're older and we come upon a new word we haven't seen in print. This is how we do it without being overly reliant, okay? It's a slow process for emergent readers, but then this starts picking up, right? It just starts taking off. Self-teaching, Scher's theory of self-teaching, is essential to build the breadth of sight word reading necessary to be a proficient reader. By fifth grade, you need to know about 5,000 new words a year. You need to read, not just know. I'm not necessarily just talking about vocabulary here. You need to be able to read them, and hopefully you also know what they all mean. 5,000 new words a year. So your fifth grade teacher isn't holding your hand through this whole process, right? Scher shows that this is how we go about things in a series of studies that shows it may take 1 to 4 exposures for students without any reading disabilities or reading delays. So what I like to do here is put together, this is my way of like reconciling, putting together orthographic mapping and lexical quality hypothesis and the self-teaching hypothesis. The Airy is saying that this is how words are stored. That's what orthographic mapping does. Perfetti and Hart with the lexical quality hypothesis are saying that the quality of the representation is impacted by factors, right? Our knowledge impacts one of those 3 factors. And Scher is saying that this is a cognitive process that's critical for independent reading. So I'm trying to connect these 3, and I'm doing it this way, where I'm saying, okay, here's this little young student from my previous slide who is trying to read the word ship. And this student, the first go around, is going, ship, right? I can imagine many of us have worked with students at this level of their reading. This is my whole work. It's pretty much here. And when the student goes to represent the word, the student may write it with an S and a P. When that student tries the word again, some things have been further clarified, and this is their next opportunity to go through the cognitive process of mapping the words. So then the student recognizes, oh yeah, let me just start right out of the gate, ship, I got it. So decoding happened, but then they said it without much hesitation, and they gave a pretty good attempt at spelling it. Next time, they actually are grouping the first 2 phonemes together, ship. There we go, right? And it's each sound in the word is represented. We're going to talk about Airy's theory of phase theory in just a second. That part will make more sense then. So each part is represented. Eventually, though, you'll get to ship, right? You say it, you read it, we got it, right? It's stored in memory for automatic retrieval of how to read it and the spelling is not laborious. Okay. So over time, self-teaching and orthographic mapping is strengthened to the point where the word can just come naturally, it looks like, okay? And that also means that the quality of the representation, the lexical quality, is improved and stable. I love that word, stable. Okay, so I'm going to do a little thing here with follow the orthographic mapping oval. So we've got all of these beautiful frameworks in the field of reading science. We have some diagrams, and I want to make sure that this theory of orthographic mapping, you can just pinpoint it when you see these other theoretical frames, right? So here we have the simple view of reading, and I'm going to connect it right here. So in the simple view of reading, you know that it's decoding times language comprehension is going to lead to the ultimate goal, which is reading comprehension. Orthographic mapping is what's going to strengthen and get you to that one that we're always looking for at decoding, right? One, we never want it to be a 0 times 1, because, right, then we're not independently able to read in order to comprehend. Okay, the next one is, so in this one, we have the 4-part processing model. And let me just move my little thing here really quickly. Sorry about that. We've got the 4-part processing model, and you could probably see here, one little tech issue here. Here we go. Okay, we've got our orthographic mapping happening at the bottom of the 4-part processing model. It's the interaction between the phonological processor and the orthographic processor. And so neither of these theories talk about orthographic mapping explicitly, but you know it's there, right? Now that you know about it. And many educators are familiar now with Scarborough's reading rope, right? Which is a beautiful diagram that represents what research has shown are critical components of reading. And down here at word recognition, this is where your orthographic mapping would happen. So you just want to make sure you don't think that orthographic mapping is a separate theory that you need to know and these other ones are happening in these silos. No, it's integrated right into it. Okay, so why is orthographic mapping so important? It's like, okay, this seems like you got it, but let's really tie this to the ultimate goal, which is comprehension. Orthographic mapping is the key to comprehension. You're thinking, wait, it's just about word reading. Well, the essence of reading difficulties is inefficient word reading. Many students who struggle have inefficient word reading. Those students need to use phonic decoding and context guessing. Those are what they're relying on. As they get older, they're still very reliant on phonic decoding, that sound by sound decoding. And then it becomes frustrating. They're just guessing at the words based on context. So while phonic decoding is essential, again, all of my work is with emergent readers who have to go through this incredible phonic decoding process. It requires a lot of effort. And when it requires so much effort, comprehension is compromised. We only have so much working memory at our disposal. So what is proficient reading? So if we're saying the ultimate goal is reading comprehension, let's talk about this concept of reading proficiency just briefly. So here I have a proficient reader has a developmentally appropriate lexicon of words that are stored in memory and can be automatically retrieved. There's a great article by Stacy and colleagues out of Florida Center for Reading Research, and she's quoting Airy and others, and she says, a typically developing reader's orthographic lexicon contains approximately 10,000 words. And these have 10,000 word-specific representations by 8th grade. Okay, so 8th grade, 10,000 word-specific representations. That is your 8th grade proficient reader. So you need, when you're dealing with 10,000 words, almost all mental energy really needs to be put towards comprehension as the concepts you're reading about are becoming so much more sophisticated. If you had to stop and go through this process of decoding for each of those 10,000 words, comprehension would be gone. All right, and that's why in the early years, we really have to build up these skills. All right, So how can we support this cognitive process of orthographic mapping? So that, again, orthographic mapping, it's a cognitive process. This is a theory based on research. Now let's get to what teachers need to know, okay? The best way to store words in memory is to analyze the letter sound correspondences in the word. So Ari has that beautiful diagram with the glue, and I just always do this kaboom, like here's what we need to do here, all right? So what I do when I talk to teachers a lot, they want to know, okay, in the word reading process, what do we do here? So I find David Kilpatrick's explanation of the 3 levels of word reading to be a very helpful framework for grounding orthographic mapping for teachers. So at level 1 of word reading development, children learn letter names and sounds. This is necessary but not sufficient for word reading. Critical, it's a bridge, okay? It's a bridge that leads to level 2, which is phonic decoding. So in phonic decoding, emergent readers use letter sound knowledge with their phonological blending skills to sound out words. We've all seen these steps that students take, where they segment and they blend and then they pronounce the word, right? So it's this print to sound relationship, or a part, they're getting sh, if, ship, right? Where they're blending those phonemes together. And Kilpatrick talks about how this is the gateway for eventual sight word reading or automatic word reading. In fact, we mentioned David Scher's work. So the self-teaching hypothesis is essential as the bridge between phonic decoding and the next level. So here's our bridge to orthographic mapping. Orthographic mapping doesn't happen until level 3. Scher's research has shown that varying amounts of experience decoding words translates into long-term memory of these words. I mentioned the 1 to 4. I also want to mention, I work with striving readers in the emergent grades. They often need, 20, 25, north of 50 exposures to some words. And there's been some research on that as well, like how many exposures and whatnot for striving readers. So I also want to say it's idiosyncratic for some of our striving readers, however many times they need to store words in memory. All right, so in level 3, because emergent readers have repeatedly used their letter sound skills and they now have unconscious phonemic skills, right? This is just the phonemic skills are happening. They're like percolating there. They're behind the scenes. They're able to do this whole to part. So oral words can be broken down into their phonemes and mapped to their spellings. They use pronunciations of words that are stored in memory and anchor the spellings to the phonemes. So this, just be careful, this whole that I'm saying is not to be confused with whole word reading, okay? Please, please. As Rayner and Dehane have explained, we process all the letters in words. We go through this parallel process, right? And that's how we know it's bit and not bet, something like that, right? Okay. I also like to use this airplane thing that I came up with, where I was like, okay, how can I explain this? Here's my depiction of those 3 levels, right? So I made the 3 levels and then I added those bridges, but I'm like, okay, let's think about it this way. When we combine Airy's theory of orthographic mapping, Kilpatrick's phases of word reading, and Scher's self-teaching hypothesis, we can think about it as the plane is on the tarmac when students have, let me go like this. Wait, hold on one second. Okay, we've got the plane on the tarmac and students are learning their letter sound knowledge. And this is great, but as I mentioned, you're not jumping into word reading yet, right? You actually have to get some other skills, and those are the skills of segmenting. So once they can apply those letters, that letter sound knowledge in combination with their phonological blending and their decoding skills, they can start reading the words, right? So they can go big, right? And say it. This process is arduous, right? I always say I'm not a good flyer. That shaky part where you're taking off, it's precarious, it's nerve-wracking. And every time a child reads the word, I'm thinking my own young children. I've one right at this stage right now. I'm like, yes, every time he says the word, yes, he got it. So eventually, when you go through that process, though, you eventually get to take off, right? I'm sorry, not take off. You get to that exponential reach where the plane starts climbing, right? And this is when you are able to see the word big, and behind the scenes, in that red part right there, behind the scenes, that mapping has occurred, and you see the word big and you're just saying big. You see cat, you're just saying cat. That's because all of the hard work has been done for you. Okay. And this becomes this exponential climb in students' ability to read words automatically by sight. This is when you feel that release in takeoff, when the plane doesn't feel as heavy and the climb feels less effortful. It's always a beautiful part. The angle of the plane represents that exponential growth in word reading when orthographic mapping really comes online, right? Again, remember whole. I know you're seeing the word big, you're saying the word big. Again, all of that segmenting and blending has happened behind the scenes. Can't emphasize that enough. So if we know that readers progress in this manner with their word reading skills, why do we go like this? Right? You see this predictable, I see the vet, I see the cat, I see the bug, right? So it really takes out, what a great word, vet, cat, those are CVC words. If we're reading a book like this, the student should be able to segment and blend the words vet and cat. If you're asking them to already read the word see and the, right, I would hope that we would have done some consonant vowel consonant work. And we should spend I'd be much more excited for the students to read 3 sentences, like the word vet, cat, and bug, than if they were just looking at all of these pictures and reading both pages of this. So I do want to say, like, I was a former teacher too, and I had some practices that I wish I didn't use. I do think we do some of these other things because there's this lack of intuition with orthographic mapping. It seems like proficient readers read words as whole units. So educators likely have thought that this instructional approach would expedite the process, right? Because it looks like we read it just by, we see it, we say it, right? I totally get it. Every teacher wants their students to be a strong reader, and we know that what strong reading looks like. It looks like automatic word reading, right? The problem is that the early stages of reading is the exact opposite of this, and we need to really celebrate it. It's effortful sounding out of every word with compromised comprehension when the students are doing their own reading. That's why beautiful read alouds with rich literature are so important. So the students can not do the decoding and just hear the passage. This effortful decoding really pays off. So teachers may want to reach for that whole word approach, but it is a superficial process. Okay. 3Qing, we know, is not the way to go. We should not be overemphasizing these other meaning and structure pieces. And flashcards, I have a bit of research on the use of flashcards and how we have to be really careful when we are using it in the developmental trajectory of students and how we are using it. So I just want to emphasize too, like true, solid, extensive, automatic word reading, right, comes with lots of decoding practice. There's no shortcuts to this. So you can think of it like readers need to crawl before they can walk, right? So that eventually the plane takes off and they can run. All right. So let's get to this now. So what are the activities to help us store words in memory? All right. Well, let's go back to the activity that we just did, and let's see how well you learned those words. And then I'm going to give you all of these other activities that you could use. Please spell and define these words. Okay, grab a piece of paper. Have fun with me for just 2 minutes. Okay, the word anthracene. Please spell and define it. The word Thanor. Please spell and define it. Wuxin. Spell and define Wuxin. Gilloid. Gilloid. Sayosi. Spell and define Sayosi. Remember, the spelling is an indication of how securely that word is stored in memory and available for automatic retrieval. Okay, now I only flashed those words to you one time. gave you the meaning, but you're a very smart person that's on this call, is a educator or district leader or very sophisticated in Pennsylvania, and you may not have made full connections, right? So it's like thinking about this flashcarding approach. Again, I always like to use my own research on flashcarding to say, like, let's really deeply consider this. So here's how the words were spelled. I am genuinely interested, by the way, if someone was able to spell all of the words correctly, put it in the chat. I know, because I know there's some gifted spellers out there. My mother is one of them. I did not get that trait. Um, she could see it one time and spell it correctly, but these people are anomalies. I find them absolutely fascinating. So let's go through the definitions. All right, again, these are fun. My kids made them up. Anthracene is a hoop with spikes. Feigner is a stroll in a swamp. Wuxing is text that is incomprehensible. My kid said the text that doesn't make sense. I said incomprehensible. Gilloid, a high-pitched noise followed by a drum beat. Sayosi is paper that smells like butter. Okay. Now, again, these are made up words. Researchers often use a lot of made up words to try and figure out the cognitive process when they want to test adults. So it's important to note that as we go through these approaches to better, so I can't see you all, we can't talk, we're not at a session together live, but I can assume that this was probably very difficult for you to retain the spelling and to retain the memory of the meaning of the word. And it's just like, let's just really feel what it's like to be one of these emergent readers, especially if you're a student who's new to the English language. This can be quite overwhelming and maybe not that productive of a use of our time. Like, how many times did you have to flashcard these, especially if it was in a pack of 20 words or whatnot? I want you to really keep this next bit in mind. So as you go through different approaches to better store words in memory, like let's not use flashcarding, let's use something with a little more analysis in it. Consider the word by the student's skill. So what word are you teaching? What are its graphophonetic components? How much graphophonetic knowledge does the student have? That should dictate your activity, okay? And really, this is critical. Like when you think about an emergent reader versus a third or fourth grader who's reading multisyllabic words, a fifth grader using multisyllabic words, you have to adjust these activities accordingly. All right. So many of you already know this one. So this is the sound letter. Sometimes it's called double decker, and it helps clarify fuzzy representations of words. Remember the lexical quality? Like, is it not that clear? Well, if not, just pull out, just write it on a piece of paper, the boxes. Don't even worry about having something proper looking like this. You can use students' own spelling. So when you see a student who has misspelled a word, you may just want to help them box the word really quickly to clarify, oh, in feigner, I know you put an F, but it's actually a PH. Let's do it this way, okay? Let's put it into the boxes. All right, you can use this early for getting kids to attend to the sounds of the words, and you can use this later in development for multi-grapheme spellings. Feiner's a perfect example of multi-grapheme spellings. All right, always have the students read the word after they segment it. All right, here's another activity that I often throw out there, count and see. None of these are radical, none of these. Count and see, also this is gonna help clarify fuzzy representations. So you would say the word wuxing, you would segment it, wa, u, sh, I, n, 5 phonemes, and then you would show the word to the students, right? And you may highlight, or you may be doing something for a complicated part of the word, maybe a silent letter, maybe a spelling pattern you haven't learned yet, and then always you're going to read the word. If it's an older student, you may do it as wu xin, and you say to the student, okay, what's the wu syllable that we've learned? What's the sheen syllable, right? Again, clarifying any irregularities. And there's my line, sorry, read the word. Always end with reading the word when you're clarifying the representations of the words. All right, this is a count and see it. I know you all use that. Here's a spell and check if you need another protocol. So you could say the word, SIOC. You could have the students spell the word, correct their word spelling by holding up your own board, right? So, but give them a chance to spell it on their own first. Then you hold the board up to see how they did, and then you read the word together. They should correct any misspellings in the middle step, okay? So say, spell, correct it, and then read it together. And finally, a fun one, circle and spell. So say the word anthracene, circle the parts, then anthracene, right? Then spell the word 3 different ways. Anthracene, anthracene, anthracene. We have students do it large, sideways, tiny print, purple marker, red colored pencil, whatever they want, 3 different ways. And then you read the word anthracene, anthracene, anthracene. Not me, the student reads the word. Okay? So think about it. You're in all of these activities, there's multiple moments to strengthen that grapheme phoneme correspondence. And we have fun. We always want to have, we want it to be engaging. Of course, there are many more ways to analyze words, and you all know many of these. I'm just putting them all together. Sometimes as teachers, it's like, oh yeah, I know there's like 20 different ways I can do this. What can someone just bundle these all together for me? Well, there's word scrambles you could do. You could use look-alike words, right? Word scrambles when you take magnetic letters or letter tiles, you just scramble them up and you say, spell the word there, right? Actually, my boxes are upside down in word scrambles. I'm sorry, I should have scrambled words on top and then the word there, but then you scramble them again, spell there again, scramble them again, spell there again. So they're constantly trying to find the words and the letters that are strewn about. It's a fun one to do. You've got your lookalike words. You have the students read through these lookalike words as quickly as possible, and their speed would build, their fluency would build over time, their accuracy would build over time. You've got your classic word chains. Take the word hat, turn it into chat, turn chat into chat. Now, along the way, the student needs to be reading the word, right? So really, I should have said, like, read this word, cat. Now, change only one letter to turn it into the word chat, okay? I have a protocol of directions I'm going to give you in just a second. You may have seen word ladders that you could start at the bottom of the ladder with the word dab, turn dab into dad, and the student writes dad, then turn dad into had, the student has to change it, and so on and so forth. Some people build their word letters up, other people build their word letters down. It's great. And finally, word sorts. So you've got 2 different spelling patterns. Let's clarify. Let's just go through a couple of words that have, or maybe I've seen teachers where the students are writing their own words. So you're saying, okay, spell the word rain. They have them spell all of the words on the slips of paper, and then they're sorting the words into AI versus AY. And that's a really great cognitive process to do the spelling on their own, where they're not just sorting the words. And then if they had spelled the word play for whatever reason, PLAI, and it goes over in the AI category, there's a conversation to be had around, well, look at, if the A sound is at the end of the word, maybe you want to change your spelling because it looks like that AY is happening mostly at the end of words. It's a great way to do word sorts. Okay. This is a free resource. I give it out whenever I can. It's now at my nonprofit, so you can just scan this QR code if you want it, and you just say that you want, it's called the Word Analysis Guide. It's this green guide. It's free. Again, so just click that button, and then we can email it straight to you. It'll show up in your inbox within, I think it's less than 24 hours. Our system just will kick it right to you. And it's got all of those activities that I just mentioned, plus some others. And I have a protocol. I love a protocol. So I know sometimes people are like scripting, but a protocol is really important. This comes out of my work in research and whatnot. It's great. And new teachers could really use this. We were all a new teacher at one point, and boy, could I have used like 10 different ways to support word analysis and a protocol to go with it. So please enjoy this little book if you would like it. Okay, so you'll have some great activities to do there. All right, we're moving into the second part here, which is much shorter, but it's on Aries. It's shorter, but just equally as important, I should say. It's on Aries phases of word reading and spelling. So now that we know how words are stored in memory, I feel like we can jump into this concept of students move through a developmental progression here. So Aries phases of word reading and spelling, you may have seen before. Phase 1 is pre-alphabetic, okay? So it's reading and spelling, pre-alphabetic word reading, pre-alphabetic spelling. In this phase, students are using visual, non-alphabetic connections. They see this a sign for McDonald's and they're saying, McDonald's. They see the box of Rice Krispies and they're saying, oh yeah, Rice Krispies, right? It's not that they are reading, or if you ask them to spell it, it's not like they could spell that word. It's just that they're using their environmental print. That's critical though, because it shows that they recognize the connections that are letters, and there's letters that make words in our world, right? Eventually, they move into phase 2, which is the partial alphabetic phase. Here, they're using partial letter sound connections. So for McDonald's, if you ask them to spell it, they may spell it MD. The most salient sounds in McDonald's would be Donald, right? It's usually the beginning, maybe a middle sound. We've got that Mick that ends and then the Donald starts. Beginning and ending sounds, or whatever the most salient sounds are, will come up in their spelling. Then we have the full alphabetic phase, where we use more complete grapheme phoneme connections within words. I love this spelling of McDonald's. You see in the third column, all the sounds in McDonald's are represented, but the spelling patterns are not accurate, right? This is phenomenal, though. This is showing us an incredible level of phonemic awareness or phoneme isolation skills. It's remarkable. And then over time, it will be further clarified or specified. The word will be more securely stored in memory, and this becomes the 4th phase called the consolidated alphabetic phase. Here, you're able to use larger grapheme phoneme units. You're able to use syllables, prefixes, and suffixes. These multi-letter graphemes help us form quite sophisticated connections in words. So here we've got McDonald's, we can spell it correctly, we can read it correctly, and all is good. Another way I like to represent the phases, Aries phases, is to use 4 quadrants. These are my own children's spelling. So this is my daughter when she was in the pre-alphabetic phase. I asked her to spell the word park, and she went on and on. She may have been writing a story about the park, but this is how she was representing the word park. So in this phase, they're writing random pseudo letters. They've memorized letters. They're not connected to the sounds in the words. I don't see a P anywhere in there, right? Or an A for park, right? These are pre-readers. They're not using their letters or sounds to read or spell. Then we get into the partial alphabetic phase, though. And here we can see the partial use of letter sound relationships. This is the word sorry. Isn't that great? Another example would be BP for bump, the most salient sounds in bump, or KR for car. So here we have connections to partial letters to sounds in words to decode and to spell. Next, in the full alphabetic phase, here's my daughter writing the word daddy. Great spelling. Children can invent more complete letter sound spellings. She's got all of the sounds in daddy represented. It's just that she doesn't know the spelling pattern yet, the double D, the Y as for E ending in 2-syllable words. But she knows the most familiar grapheme phoneme correspondences, and she's using them. Finally, the consolidated phase, the word love, right? If the word love was being represented in the full phase, it might be LUV. Here, this word has now been securely stored in memory. She is able to use her spelling knowledge. She's got multi-letter, well, she doesn't have, but multi-letter units are being used to create these connections so that we can have a larger sight word lexicon, and the spellings of words are bonded to the pronunciation and retained in memory, which is great. So you see this beautiful progression. This is usually some kind of like pre-K through 2nd grade. You're starting to see more of that consolidated alphabetic spelling come into play. Sometimes it takes more time though, Matching spellings to their phases. This is a great activity that I like to use with teachers around New York. So what I'd like you to do right now, I just went over those phases. What I'd like you to do is on your piece of paper, write pre for pre-alphabetic, give yourself a little space, or create 4 quadrants. Why don't you do it that way? Or a list, whatever you prefer. Pre, partial, full, consolidated. Put these words, these spellings of the words into their phases. Okay? Map each word. No, I shouldn't use the word map. Match. Sorry. Match each of these spellings to the phase that it represents. Some of the phases have multiple representations. So see if you could do that. I'll give 1 minute. Okay, I hope that you were successful here. In the pre-alphabetic phase, we have, I did it this way, I'm sorry. So here's the number of representations. I'm sorry, I wanted to show you this first. Here are the number of representations of each of the 4 phases. So you can check your work first. If you were debating whether there were 4 partial alphabetic, there are. So see if you have all 4. And let's fill these in. This random letter string would be our pre-alphabetic phase. Then we have the partial alphabetic, just the R for raincoat works. The RC works for raincoat. RNCT, oh boy, we're hearing more sounds. And a beautiful representation, raincoat. Beautiful for partial alphabetic. Now, raincoat, that last one, is not full alphabetic because all of the sounds in the word are not represented. Here, raincoat, all phonemes are represented. It's full alphabetic and a wonderful full alphabetic with more sophisticated spelling patterns. This kiddo learned about the bossy E. Boy, is she executing on it. And finally, only when we're in consolidated do we have raincoat. Now, even as I say that last thing, like only when we're in consolidated, let me clarify something here. So I'm going to go to this next slide. The term phase was intentionally used by Dr. Airy because students can be mapping words, that cognitive process of mapping, in different phases at one point in time. So you may be able to spell the word raincoat, right? And it looks like you're in the consolidated phase, but many other words in your orbit, you're still functioning in the full alphabetic phase, right? So it depends on how many times students have been exposed to the word and their level of letter sound knowledge. That's really going to come through with regards to what phase you're in. And then the most widely represented phase, whatever phase you're seeing in their spellings, in their word readings, right? That's the phase that they are in. So you'd really have to look overall of a body of work of theirs to determine if they're in the, let's say, partial versus full alphabetic phase. So another way to say this is the predominant phase is what to consider. So the pre-alphabetic, they're not going to be reading words, decoding them. They're not going to have accurate spellings. And the partial alphabetic, I took away some of those arrows from Airy's diagram. And I'm just saying, okay, you have a few of the salient spelling pronunciation connections. And overall, you're using phonic decoding and you're using phonetic spellings, but these spellings are not complete. Also, with your decoding, you're going to have quite a few errors, right? Full alphabetic, you're getting there. Only you see how I grayed out one of the arrows in the middle where the red ones are? Your spellings aren't quite accurate yet. You're doing great with phonic decoding. Your phonic spelling is fantastic, but it's just not accurate. You don't have all of the graphophonetic knowledge you need for accurate spellings. And down here in Consolidated, I kind of had fun here and just put a bunch of them because you're using complete mappings so that overwhelmingly the words you're coming upon for your grade level, overwhelmingly you're reading them and spelling them accurately. All of the arrows are in red. The glue is in red. Just a second on older striving readers. Many are stuck actually in the partial alphabetic phase. You may think that they're stuck in the full alphabetic phase, but so often they haven't actually made it into the full alphabetic. And they'd be much better off if they were in full alphabetic, because actually your reading can pick up a little bit more once you're able to segment and phonetically decode more words accurately. So they have inadequate phonics knowledge. They have a lack of systematic and explicit instruction. They need a lot more practice than what they've been given. And they need practice to mastery being about 80% accurate. To ensure success of all readers, we need to lay a strong foundation of phonic decoding in kindergarten. It really has to start in kindergarten, and we have to continue to build on this. And into the upper grades, we've got to tap into, even in the younger grades, morphology in the younger grades, fabulous. Getting more sophisticated with it as we move on, grabbing some etymology lessons, and really going hard on those spelling patterns will help so much. As I did with orthographic mapping, I connected it to other theories. And just very quickly here, I want to show you, this is Charles' theory of development. And I just want to say orthographic mapping happens in stage 0 through stage, we can go into stage 3 with orthographic mapping here before we become our really proficient selves. And also with spelling theories, there are fabulous other spelling theories. I know Aries is a phase theory, it's phase theory of reading and spelling. Let's just focus on spelling for 1 second. These other excellent theories from Gentry and Baer, I'm always like, the more theories we have that align, the better for our field. So you've got Aries phases that come right in and complement this. You can see Gentry has a beautiful transitional phase, and you can see Baer and colleagues have these beautiful additional phase in there as well, or stage. Other researchers call their stages. They are quite complementary. So it's not that one is better than the others or whatnot. Finally, in the implications for practice with phase theory, you want to make sure that as a teacher, you're facilitating getting students into the next phase. This is an active process. It's not passive. So to move students from the pre to the partial, you really need to get in there with the phonemic awareness and the letter sound knowledge. To move from partial to full, lots of segmenting and blending of phonemes, and you need to start building complete phonics knowledge that's systematic. And from full to consolidated, knowledge of spelling patterns, right? That rein to rein, gate to gate, it's key in order to clarify and specify spellings of words. You've got to get into those advanced phonics concepts. E-I-G-H saying A is really quite necessary. So in summary, all of this taken together, our decoding practice supports orthographic mapping. You get it about the analysis. I hope you enjoy that little green manual that I share. Make sure when students are reading, when you prompt them, that you're prompting them to look at the letter sound correspondences, even in the youngest grades. It's not just, well, let's try that again with no, like, no, it's actually look at the letters in the word. Let's now try the word again. Always consider your students' phases. What is your expectation for their word reading and spelling based on their phase? And what, as an instructor, do you need to facilitate movement into the next phase, that active piece? And finally, teacher knowledge really, really matters. In order to do this facilitation, you really need to have effective word reading and spelling strategies and quite an extensive phonetic knowledge bank. Even if you're teaching younger grades, that students are going to come upon words all the time, and you don't want to say, I don't know why it's spelled that way or whatnot. Those teachable moments are invaluable. So here's my selected readings, which are in the handouts, and thank you very much. If you'd like to know more about my research, you can go to my academic website or my nonprofit site for resources.